Good afternoon, everybody. Welcome to Rise Above. This is your opportunity to learn how to get your book started. Before we get going, though, I would love to learn a little bit more about you. If you could put in the chat maybe where you're from, and if you know what you want to write your book on, put the topic in there, or if you're not quite sure, maybe put in what products or services you sell that could help your clients. And while you're doing that, I'll take a sip of water so I can get ready for the presentation. If you don't know how to find the chat, if you hover your mouse at the bottom of the screen, if you're on a computer, or at the top, if you're on an iPad or whatever, up comes a menu and you just click on chat and you can add your information. Oh, I see some messages coming in now. Thank you very much. So while you're doing that, I'm going to go ahead and get started. Imagine that you could purchase advertising that would increase the visibility of your brand, that would enable the people seeing that ad to know, like, and trust you and refer you to others, that would be available 24/7 with no expiration at all, and that would be seen by over 5 million people every day. Wouldn't that be amazing? Unfortunately, there is no such advertising. Although if it were there, it would be incredibly expensive. But if you write and publish a book and publish it on Amazon, you can obtain most of those benefits, especially if it's a well-written book. Of course, there's a problem. Books are very time-consuming to write. If they weren't as difficult to write, you all would have already gotten your book written and published, right? So how do you go about getting your book done? How do you find the time to write it? How do you know what topic you should be writing on, or how to get started with it? Well, that's what I want to share with you in this webinar. We're going to go through some steps that are going to help you get your book started and give you an overview of the landscape so you know what's in store for you when you're going to be writing your book. Okay, next. Let me give you a little bit of background about myself. I started SkillBites about a little over 12 years ago. I'm a business attorney by trade. I have written many, many articles, published in various journals. I have given many presentations, and I was trying to figure out a way to use that content and get more value out of it and provide it to people who could really benefit from it. So it occurred to me that I could write a series of short books that were narrowly targeted to exactly the audience that I wanted to do business with. I figured, okay, that's not a novel concept. I'm sure there's some place online that's got all the resources I need to get my book done. But I couldn't find it. So I thought, all right, maybe I'm not the best web surfer. Somebody in my network must know of this resource. So I reached out to several hundred people in my network and said, have you published a book? And if so, who did you use? Could you recommend them? Well, nobody could recommend a good resource. But about 60 people got back to me and said, I love your idea. So if you find that resource, could you share it with me? I went ahead and self-published my book. It was very time consuming. It was very frustrating. I made a ton of mistakes, but ultimately I got my first book done. I sent it out to a number of people, and the feedback I got back was very positive. They really liked the short book. Well, about 20 of them reached back out to me and said, I would like to do that too. Can you help me with my book? And I did, and I found out that there are many more ways to get a book done than what I did, smarter ways, more efficient. And I also found out that I really enjoyed helping people get their books done. So that was the genesis of SkillBites, which is designed specifically to help business owners and professionals write, publish, and promote their books as easily and conveniently as possible. So we have all of the services that you might need to help you get your book done. Okay, next. What I want to cover today, we'll start off with, why would you want to write a book? Is that the right strategy for you? Then we'll share several steps for getting started. I have a 5-step process that I will be going over. We'll cover some writing alternatives because I know that some of you don't really like writing or don't feel you're good at it. So there's some options for you, as well as for those who have limited time. We're going to go over some options for you to get your book done as well. Then we'll cover the 3 biggest publishing options available to you, so you know what you can do with your book once the manuscript is written, and the post-manuscript steps that are really important to know about, because you don't want to spend all your time writing a book and then either not know what to do with it at that point or not want to pursue it because all of those steps will take even more time or more money and you don't want to spend it. So know up front if you're going to be prepared to go through this and write your book. And then hopefully we'll have some time at the end for questions and answers. I'm going to share with you a couple case studies from a couple of my authors. This is Sarah, who's an image consultant. She is a highly regarded speaker and was invited to speak at the Pennsylvania Conference for Women in front of 8,000 people. She was invited to sell her book at the conference, but she didn't have a book. She had many people come up to her after her presentation and ask if they could buy her book. But she had to turn them down because she didn't have a book. She was a speaker at another conference where she had had the opportunity to have a sponsor buy 360 copies of her book to give to the attendees. She had to turn that down too because she didn't have a book. She knew she needed to get a book done. She didn't know how she could find the time. She wasn't quite sure what her topic should be, and she didn't know how to get started. Sarah took one of my book writing workshops, which is the basis for my Book It course that's available. And she became highly motivated to get her book done because she now knew how to do it. Within 6 weeks, she had a draft of her manuscript totally written. 4 months later, she had copies of her book in hand. She got more paid speaking engagements. She got TV interviews and other media interviews. And she sent copies of her book to some of her prospects, and she got new business from those prospects as well as from existing clients who came back to her. But despite all that, Sarah said the most powerful benefit for her was the personal value. She had such a huge sense of confidence in herself and her achievement from having gotten her book done. Now, let me tell you about another client, Dr. John. Dr. John is a chiropractor who knew that he was getting more and more patients suffering from headaches and neck pain. So he wanted to write a book on how people can avoid or reduce that pain, principally to help people as opposed to trying to get new business. With SkillBites' help, he got his book written and published, and he told me that within 2 years of the publication of his book, he has gotten over 40 new clients directly related to his book, which he knows because in the intake, when people come to him, they're asked, how did you find out about me? And over 40 people have said they saw his book, or somebody who had his book told them they should see him, all related to his book. And the interesting thing about Dr. John is he did almost no marketing. All he did was he put a copy of his book, the front cover, on his website. He provided copies in his waiting room that people could take for free. And he gave free copies to orthopedics to give to their patients. That's all he did for 40 plus new clients that brought him in over $60,000 over that 2-year period. Pretty good return on investment for the 5,000 or so that he spent on his book. So now I want to go over a few more things about books, but before doing that, I would love to hear how excited you are to write your book. So if you could put your number on a scale of 1 to 10 in the chat, that would be great. Now there's no pressure here. There's no judgment. It's where you're at, which is fine. I just want you to know, however, that if you're below about an 8, then there are things you can do to get your book done. But if it's not as much of a high priority for you, that it's an 8, 9, or 10, I wouldn't recommend that you spend a lot of time focusing on your book. The chances are good that it would not be productive time. You're going to procrastinate. Other things are going to come in and take priority for you. And the problem with that is when it takes you a long time for you to get your book done, it may wind up that by the time it's finally done, it's no longer relevant for where you are or where your clients are. I've had a number of people come to me and say, well, I started this book 4 years ago or 10 years ago or 8 years ago, whatever, and I really want to just finish it because I put all this good time into it and now I just want to get it done. Like, well, if it's not a meaningful book for you, why would you spend more time trying to get that book done? I don't want you to be in that situation. But wherever you are on the spectrum, I hope that you get valuable information out of this webinar. So now let's go over some of the additional benefits that you can get by being a published author. So your book is a really compelling tool in this information age. When you have a published book, you're going to be able to develop a much better connection with your target reader than you would with any other type of content marketing strategy. Think of blog posts or YouTube videos or social media posts. You just don't get that deep connection with them. You don't get that know, like, and trust factor that you can get from your book. Now, a book can provide a passive income stream, but that is not a major factor in writing a book. Most authors receive fairly limited funds from the sale of their books. In fact, many of my authors simply give their books away because when you give somebody a book, you are creating a sense of reciprocity and they're more likely to want to use your services or refer you to others, which will be a lot more valuable to you than the revenue that you would get from the sale of your book. And we've talked a little bit about the enhanced credibility. When you're a published author, you are immediately perceived as an expert. When you're on Amazon, you have terrific visibility. People go to Amazon to buy things. So if somebody's searching on Amazon for the topic that you discuss in your book will come up in the search if you've got everything set up properly. Also, Google loves Amazon. So if somebody's doing a search on Google for the topic that you've written your book on, chances are you're going to come up pretty high in the ranking on Google. We talked a little bit about business development as well, sending the books out to your prospects, your customers, other people in your network can bring you more business. It's also a great qualifying tool because think about it. If somebody comes to you because they've read your book, you don't have to sell them. They're already sold on using you. And if somebody reads your book and doesn't come to you, there's a pretty good chance that they would not be a very good prospect. And one more thing about Dr. John was he said he no longer does any advertising. He lets the book speak for him. So you can actually save money on other marketing and advertising that you're doing by having a book. Now you can also use your book as a content marketing strategy in that you can take parts of your book and tweet them or post them on Facebook or LinkedIn or whatever. And having a book can help drive traffic to your website as the target readers then go to learn more about you. Aside from those benefits, there's a great feeling of satisfaction in knowing that you are helping to improve people's lives and you are leaving a lasting legacy behind. Your voice, your message is being left behind, your expertise for people to benefit from. But there's one more benefit that's really, really powerful. Okay, next. And that's the personal value. That's what Sarah was talking about. Not only will you gain that sense of accomplishment and the confidence from having written a book, but you have spent an immense amount of time putting together this book and crafting your message. When you have defined your message that clearly, it will enhance all of your communications. It will also enable your staff to be better able to articulate your message. And that is really, really powerful. Imagine if everybody in your company knew exactly how to articulate your message. So your book is not just a bucket item list. It's a critical part of your strategy. So next I want to go over the steps for getting started, and we'll talk about your business objective. Without identifying that, it's difficult for you to pick the right topic for your book. Who is your target reader? Again, that's pretty important for defining what topic you want to write your book on. And then we'll go over selecting your topic, developing the game plan for getting your book written, and outlining your book so that when you get to the writing part, it will be a lot quicker for you. And we're going to start with your business objective. Your book is a powerful tool, but it can only get you to the results that you want if you know what those objectives are that you want to achieve. What are some business objectives? Well, they could be increasing the revenue of a particular service. Maybe it's your most profitable service that you offer. Or maybe you're introducing a new service. And so by having a book, you'll be known as an expert for that service. Or maybe you're entering into a new audience that you haven't worked with before, or a new geographic area. There are many different business objectives you might have. So you start with identifying where you want your business to go. Then you determine, how would a book help me get there? And is the book the best way to get there. Because frankly, there are a lot of different marketing tactics out there. And for some of you, the book might not be the best approach. If it is a good approach for you, you want to try to figure out what can you do with your book to help you achieve that objective. Just knowing the objective is part of the battle, but knowing how you're going to use your book to achieve that objective will be a lot more powerful for you. So for instance, if you want to increase your revenue for a particular service, you might send your book out to your prospects, have an email blast about the publication of your book to your customers and to your whole network, and follow up with people. So define that action, the actions you want to take when your book is done to help you get to your objectives. The second step that we'll be looking at is defining your target audience. Now, a lot of people think that anybody would benefit from their book, just like anybody would benefit from their services. But you've probably realized that when you narrowly define your target audience, you'll be a lot more effective and you'll actually get more clients that way, because the ones who really need what you're offering will be able to find you. And likewise with your book, the more narrowly you can target your reader for the focus of your book, the more your book will speak to that reader, and they'll understand that you know what they're going through and you have the expertise to be able to help them. So you want to narrowly define who your target reader is. Your ideal client is your target reader. And then you want to think about what are the various challenges that that target reader has that you can address in your book. And that's how you get to step 3, identifying your topic. You want to brainstorm the different topics that you could write about in your book that would help you achieve your objective and help your ideal client or your target reader overcome the challenges that they are facing. After you've done that brainstorming, maybe you've come up with 8 or 10 ideas, narrow it down to 1, 2, or 3 ideas that would be the most powerful, that you most want to write about. And then you go into the third prong of selecting your topic, which is confirming that there's sufficient interest in that topic. Because frankly, it's kind of a waste to have spent all your time writing a book that it turns out there's not all that much interest in. So next I want to cover, how do you confirm interest? It turns out that Amazon is a really great tool for confirming the amount of interest in a book. You can go on Amazon and you can look at how many books there are on the topic that you want to write on. If there are many, many books, that's actually a good sign, because it means that there are a lot of people interested in that topic. On the other side, if there aren't very many books, maybe there's no books or there's a few books, your book will stand out, but standing out where there's not much of a market isn't going to gain you very much. Now, another thing you can do on Amazon is look at the ranking of the books on your topic. You can scroll down on the book description page to the section that's called product details. And that actually provides you with some very interesting information. You'll see the number of pages in the books. You'll see the categories that those books have been filed within. And you'll see the ranking of those books. A low ranking means it's selling a lot. Number 1 rank means it's the bestseller, the number 1 bestseller in that category, which means that it's selling a fair number of copies every single day, assuming that the category is a pretty decent sized category. Some categories are really abstruse and there aren't very many people in it. And so number one just means you're better than everybody else. But by and large, if you're number one, that's really great. So if the books that you're looking at are very high ranked, 100,000 or 400,000 or whatever, they're not selling very well. If it's a low rank, that means there are people buying those books. So that's really good. Now, there's lots of other tools that you can use for confirming interest as well. You can look to see how many blogs there are out there, how many YouTube videos. You can do a Google keyword search and find out how many people are searching on the types of keywords that would relate to your topic, and you'll get some really good results. And if you don't know how to use Google keywords, you can just do a search in Google for Google keywords and you'll get information for how to do those searches. So once you've confirmed interest in your topic, you'll have your objective, you'll have your target reader identified, you'll know what topic you want to write on. So step number 4 is determining your game plan. How are you going to get your book written? I recommend that if your book is truly a priority for you, you need to treat it like any other business project that you have going on. You need to determine when you want to have your book done, and then you can work backwards to figure out what you have to do to get it done by that time. Let me give you an example. Let's suppose you want to write a 100-page book and you want to have it done in 6 months. Figure that you'll spend about a month doing the foundational work of identifying your objectives and your target audience and the action plans that you want to take with your book, figuring out what you want to include in your book, on your topic, and putting together your outline, etc. That leaves you with 5 months to write 100 pages. That's about 20 pages per month, which comes out to roughly 5 pages per week. How much time will it take for you to write 5 pages? Let's suppose you estimate maybe 4 hours of your time. You could do it in one 4-hour stretch, but that might not be realistic for you. Maybe you could do it in 2 2-hour stretches or 4 1-hour stretches. Maybe you can't even use a full hour. Maybe you have to break it down into half-hour sessions. Or when you realize that you only have a half hour, maybe you have to think about, okay, maybe I need more than 6 months. Then whatever amount of time you think you can work in your schedule, you need to put it down on your calendar and treat it as a high priority. Don't let other things come in and you push off getting work done on your book. Now, the chances are that you're really busy and you probably don't even have enough time to get done everything that you now have on your plate. So you have to figure out what can you give up and what can you delegate to make more time in your schedule to work on your book. Because I don't recommend necessarily that you reduce the amount of time that you're sleeping. You still need to have a good night's sleep. Maybe you're spending time on Facebook that you could reduce, or on television or whatever. Maybe there's some things that somebody else on your staff could do, or somebody in your family, or that you pay somebody to do for you. You can ask your spouse, for instance, to maybe cook some meals for you. And so that frees up some time, not necessarily time that you want to spend writing your book, but time that you could get other things done, that you could then spend time during the day when you're more creative working on your book. And that moves into the next question of when you're going to write. If you know that you can try to carve out, say, an hour a day, when is the best time for you to spend that hour? For some people, it's first thing in the morning because you get that out of the way before there are interruptions. But other people find that they work better later in the day or even in the evening. You have to figure that out for yourself. What time of the day are you going to work and where are you going to work? If you can work well at your office without interruptions and you want to be there in case of any emergencies, then work at your office. But if you know that you're subject to interruptions at your office, then maybe think about working at at your home or at a library, if and when libraries reopen, or at a cafe or something like that. You also want to think about who could hold you accountable to your timeline. It might be a family member or a friend or a colleague, or you can use SkillBites. But when you have somebody holding you accountable to your timetable, you're more likely to actually do what you need to do when you've scheduled it. So having this game plan will help you get through the process of getting your book done. And without it, it will take you quite a bit longer. Next, we'll go into step 5, which is outlining your book. Now, I would say somewhere between 80 to 90% of my clients find that they work much more productively when they have an outline, because that outline allows them to focus on just the little bit that they want to get done. It's much less overwhelming to focus on a small bit than to try to figure out the whole book. So how do you create an outline? Well, I recommend that you start with a brain dump of all of the different ideas that you think you might want to include in your book. If you write them down on sticky notes or index cards, that will make it easier for you to rearrange them so that you can collate them into the major categories. For instance, if you're writing a book on interview tips, your major categories might be first deciding what kind of job you're looking for, how do you find the companies that you want to approach, what kind of clothing you're going to wear, what kind of questions you're going to ask. So you have this whole list of things and you figure out that these are the major issues, and then you have the subtopics that go with that, each of those major issues. Those major issues become your chapters, and then the subtopics become what you address in each of those chapters. You can look at what other material you've already created, whether it's blog posts or articles or presentations or videos or whatever, and plug those into the relevant parts of the outline so you don't have to recreate that content. And it's readily available for you to use. You may have some case studies that you want to include as well. Stories are very powerful. So put in your outline what stories you want to include in your book. And once you have your detailed outline ready, you'll find, I think, that it will be much easier for you to get your book written. So those are the 5 steps to get started with your book. And next, we're going to look at the different publishing options. Oh, excuse me. First, we're going to look at some writing options. So even if you have no interest in writing your book, you can still get a good book done. You can use a ghostwriter. Now, ghostwriting is very widely accepted. Many people think of ghostwriting as sort of cheating because somebody else is writing the book, not you. But in fact, the ghostwriter is taking the content from you and putting it into a book. So it is still your valuable expertise that is the subject of the book. It is your book. What you have to be careful about with a ghostwriter is knowing that they have some experience in writing the type of book that you want to write, that they're going to be good at capturing your voice in the book, that you have a good contract with them, that they're not going to plagiarize anybody else's material, that it's work for hire, meaning you own the copyright. So there's some details that you have to do, some due diligence and other things to make sure that you're getting the right ghostwriter to write your book. But in essence, the ghostwriter is going to be able to put together a book for you quicker than you can, freeing up your time to focus on what's important for you. And the likelihood is they're going to come out with a better product than what you would have come out with because they're a professional writer and you're not. SkillBites has ghostwriters available, so if that's something that you want to consider, let us know. The second option here is called Speak Your Book, and that applies for people who are much more comfortable speaking than writing. What I recommend here is that you take all of the different pieces of your outline and you make them into questions. So if a topic is to determine what your ideal job is, then the question would be, how do you determine what your ideal job is? Then you record yourself answering that question. Or better yet, have somebody else ask you the questions so that if you are explaining something and they don't fully understand what you're saying, they can ask follow-up questions. Chances are you wouldn't be asking those follow-up questions to yourself, but somebody who is, for instance, in your target readership, asking or listening to your answers could be asking you questions that you can then clarify what you've just said. When you get the recording all done, you can then convert it into text. You can work from that to write your book. You can work from the recording to write your book, or you can hand off the recording and the text to a ghostwriter to write your book for you, which will be actually a little bit less expensive than starting the ghostwriting process from scratch. The third option for writing your book is called staging your book. So we'll go to the next slide, please. When you stage your book, you're basically breaking everything down into fairly small bits, say 300 to 500 words, just like writing from your outline, except that in addition, you're going to post that content or get feedback on that content before you actually put it into your book. So you could make it into blog posts or post it on LinkedIn or Facebook. You could use it in your group coaching program to get some feedback. You want to get it out there so that your target readership has an opportunity to give you some feedback on it. You can then clarify your ideas or add more information or make it more resonant for your target readership. It's a lot less overwhelming when you think about just writing the little bits, and it will help you get out a book that's going to be better for your reader. The fourth step here, hiring an editor, isn't exactly an option because you really need to have an editor. The point here is to remember that your editor can polish your book for you, and you don't have to spend your time going over the material over and over again. It's sort of like the person who fully cleans their house before they have their cleaning lady come. What was the point of having the cleaning lady come? So if you're going to be working on your book and rehashing what you've written and making little tweaks here and there, it's going to take you much, much longer to get your book done. You know you're going to need an editor. Rely on the editor to do the polishing. Get your book done. When you get the edit back, you can go over it. Yeah, maybe do a little bit more polishing at that point if you feel that there's a need to. But the idea is your book can't help you until it's out there. So these 4 tips are to help you get your book out there as quickly as possible. And now we want to look at some publishing options. There are 3 main publishing outlets for you. Going with a traditional publisher is the most well-known, and it's the most prestigious. The problem, however, is that traditional publishers really don't take on new authors very often. Also, most traditional publishers will not accept unsolicited manuscripts. You can't just send your manuscript to a traditional publisher and have them review it. You have to go through a literary agent. Literary agents work on commission. They usually get 15% of whatever advance or royalties you get from your book. So a literary agent isn't likely to take you on unless they're pretty assured that they'll be able to find a publisher for you. To get a literary agent usually involves putting together a 30+ page proposal that describes your book and why it's so great. It describes your network and how so many people in your network would buy your book when it comes out. And it describes your marketing strategy for promoting your book and your own marketing savvy for implementing that strategy. Because a publisher isn't going to accept the book from a literary agent unless they know that there's going to be a return on investment for them. If they're spending this money getting your book edited and the cover designed and all that, then they want to get a return on investment. So they want to know that your book's really good, that you have a sizable network, and that you have the marketing savvy and the plan to promote your book. Because even when the traditional publisher does take you on, they're probably not going to do much of the marketing. You still need to do that. So it can take months, if not years, to land a traditional publisher. And even at that point, it's going to be 12 to 18 months after you get accepted before your book comes out. So if your book were done today, January 12th of 2021, your book may not be out there until sometime late in 2023. And all that time, you've not been able to use your book. If you don't want to wait that long, you could go with self-publishing. Self-publishing can be a lot quicker, but you have to do all the legwork. You have to find an editor and a cover designer and a layout designer and figure out how to get your book up on Amazon or other platforms, how to get it as an ebook and a print book. And there are a lot of mistakes that you can make in that process. You might hire a graphic artist, for instance, for your cover design. Graphic artists might have great artistic ability, but they might not know covers, and they might not know how to design a cover that's going to meet the specifications of the printer or of Amazon. I've had so many authors come to me with issues about getting their books on Amazon. Amazon tells them the cover doesn't meet their specifications. They didn't hire somebody who's a cover designer and understands those requirements. I made a ton of mistakes when I first started, and I don't want you to have to go through that. So it's time consuming and frustrating, but you can self-publish. Many people do. But you guys are business owners, and you might not want to spend your time doing it that way. Assisted publishing is the happy medium between traditional publishing and self-publishing. Whether it's called hybrid publishing or indie publishing or assisted publishing, they're all pretty much the same thing. Basically, you hire somebody who has the expertise to get your book published, and you pay them for the services that you need them to do. If you already know somebody who's a really good editor, then you don't have to pay the assisted publisher for editing. If you already have somebody who can format the book for you, then you can do that. You don't have to necessarily go through the assisted publisher for that. Or if you want to upload it yourself to Amazon. But with assisted publishing, you'll get your book done quicker and you'll get a higher quality, likelihood is, than if you self-published, because your assisted publisher knows what they're doing most of the time. That's the one caveat. You do have to do some due diligence and make sure that you're hiring a reputable publisher. I've had many people come to me. Most recently, my client Mark, his assisted publisher wound up going bankrupt, and he had a devil of a time getting his files out of that publisher to be able to give to me to get his book finally done. And I've had others who have had similar problems. So you do have to do a little bit of legwork to find the right assisted publisher. Okay, next. Next, I want to go over the various steps that you need to be aware of, will need to be done once your manuscript is complete. We've already talked a little bit about the importance of editing. There are 3 different levels of editing. There's just plain proofreading, then there's copy editing, and there's developmental editing. So you kind of need to know which one you need and get the right person to do it. There's ISBNs and barcode. These are not required if all you're going to do is sell your book from your own website. But if you're going to sell on Amazon or other platforms, then you must have ISBNs and a barcode for the back of your print book. Now, Amazon does provide free ISBNs. However, people in the industry know exactly what Amazon's ISBNs are like, and so they'll know that you've self-published if you use Amazon's free ones. ISBNs are not that expensive. You also have to be aware that there are many places online where you can buy ISBNs for really cheap, but they don't work. The only source of ISBNs that will work on Amazon and other book retail outlets are from Bowker, B-O-W-K-E-R. And while they're not expensive, you do have to get them from Bowker or from your assisted publisher, who probably buys the ISBNs from Bowker in bulk and can actually save you money. You don't have to get a Library of Congress catalog number. It's optional. It will make your book look a little bit more professional if you have the LCCN on your copyright page, but again, you don't have to do that. If you don't have any testimonials or reviews, your book is not going to do as well. So you got to leave yourself a couple months to try to get some testimonials from members of your target audience or from industry experts or others that will help you sell your book. We've already talked a little bit about the importance of having your book look professional, not just with the editing, but also with the layout design and the cover design. They have to look really good. And your cover has to look good, not just on your book, it needs to look good in the thumbnail size on Amazon. You have to know how to format your book for ebook and print book publication. You have to get your book up on Amazon and other sites. And last but not least, you have to promote your book. If you don't do any marketing, how are people going to know that your book is out there? Don't rely just on people coming into Amazon for you to find enough people to purchase your book. If you don't have the wherewithal to do the marketing yourself, you can outsource it. If you don't have the budget to outsource it and you don't want to do it yourself, then you need to seriously consider, is it really worth writing a book if you're not going to do any promotion? Okay, What's the next step? Let me recap what we've done so far. We've talked about why you should write a book and the various benefits of being a published author. We went through the 5 steps for getting started, knowing what your objective is and who your target reader is, so you can identify the best topic to write your book on, developing a game plan to get your book written, and developing an outline to make it a lot easier to get your book written. We talked about 4 writing options. Next slide, please. We talked about speaking your book, staging your book, recording your, getting a ghostwriter for your book, and not spending your time polishing it, but relying on an editor to do that. We also covered the 3 main publishing options of traditional, self-publishing, and assisted or hybrid publishing. So, and then we went through all of the various post-manuscript steps that you need to do. So that's a lot of information. So it can be overwhelming, especially when you try to think about implementing it. What I want to offer you is a complimentary consultation to help you get your book out there. That's what you should be doing. If this is really what you want to get done to get your book out, then go to this link and schedule an appointment, and I'll help you map out your game plan or whatever issue it is that you're confronting that is preventing you from getting your book done. So if Katie or Liz, if you could put that link in the chat, then you can just click on the link and I'll see you at your appointment. Okay, we have about 10 minutes or so for questions. If there are questions that people have, Liz, if you could let me know what questions, unmute yourself, and I will do my best to answer them.
Hello, Judy.
Yes.
Hi. Thank you for this. It's wonderful. My book is done and it's on Amazon already. The part that I am at is the marketing piece.
Yes.
And you know, just kind of getting the word out there, and we're going through that piece. Is SkillBites someone that does the marketing, or they don't? Are like, what services do you provide? I don't.
Right. Thank you for that question. Yes, we do provide marketing services. And for those of you who are trying to figure out how to market, I have an online course called Publish It that deals with all of the post-manuscript steps. It covers how to promote your book. It covers all the information that is relevant on Amazon, its royalty programs, and how to optimize your book and things like that. And it covers also how to leverage your book. So that's an option for you. And then we have specific services on book launches and bestseller campaigns and PR campaigns and social media campaigns and things like that.
And the one I'm interested in is the bestseller campaign. So should I still go and make a booking to consult with you, or?
Yes, we can talk about whether that is a good option for you, and I can go into the details of what's involved.
Okay, thank you.
Any other questions that I can help people with?
Yes, Judy, I've actually got a few. But first of all, from a ghostwriter standpoint, what's typical dollar amount that costs on a ghostwritten book?
Well, it's a very interesting question because the cost of ghostwriters varies very widely. You can find ghostwriters for 25 cents a word. You can find ghostwriters for a lot more than that. You know, $10 or $15, $20 a word. Some ghostwriters will not take on anybody unless the job is at least $40,000 for them. So it depends on who you're hiring. It depends on how quickly you need the book done. It depends on how clear your concept is for the book, what materials you have developed. A ghostwriter who doesn't have to do any research, who can get the content out of materials that you already developed, is going to be less expensive than a ghostwriter who has to do extensive research for you and spend a lot of time getting the concepts out of your head.
Sure.
So rough ballpark, if you're looking at something in the 100 pages range, you're probably somewhere in the $15,000 to $20,000 range for a decent ghostwriter.
Okay. And then Judy, in that you mentioned the length of the book, and I see that a lot of people that are thinking about books are process improvement, personal improvement. And in that regard, what are you finding is a sweet spot in terms of popularity of books in those areas? And maybe that's I feel like I'm asking my 8th grade teacher how long the term paper has to be.
The short answer is your book should be as long as it takes to get your message out.
Sure.
That's not terribly helpful, however. It also depends on what your objective is. Many of my authors are looking to get speaking engagements. Event planners will give priority to applicants who have books, but only if the applicant has a pretty decent sized book. They're not as keen on books that are very short, particularly books that don't have a spine. To have a book with a spine, your book should be at least 120 pages.
Okay.
So if speaking is one of your objectives, then you want to have a longer book. If lead generation is your principal objective, then a shorter book is just fine. I have a lot of authors who are writing books in the 50 to 75 page range because they're much quicker to write and they're much faster for the target reader to read.
Yeah.
So they're giving these books away and they're finding that that works really well for them.
Okay, very good. That was helpful. And then the last thing is with Amazon, and I've had a few friends that talk about books that to create a digital book, you do risk the ability for people to simply share that that content without remuneration. Any thoughts on that?
There is something called digital rights management. You can click on that button to prohibit people from doing that, but I actually don't recommend that you restrict that ability because it will also prevent somebody who buys your ebook from reading it on their phone and their tablet and other devices. And that can be really annoying to your buyer.
Yeah.
You don't want to annoy your buyer. So if they share it, then look at it as a good thing that they thought it was worth sharing with somebody else and now somebody else knows about your expertise.
Great response. Thank you.
Mm-hmm.
Okay. We have a question from the chat.
Yes.
What is the best program to use to write with? For example, is it Word? Is it OneNote? What are your thoughts?
Right. I think writing a book in Word works just fine because the editor is going to find it much easier to edit your book from Word. They can keep the track changes on so that you, as the author, can see what changes that they're making and easily accept or reject those changes. And don't worry about trying to format your text because in the layout stage, all the formatting disappears anyway, so that the layout designer can create the professional design for your book. So
Okay.
just write.
And that kind of ties into another question in the chat. When you're writing a book and you want to write, say, about 120 pages, if you're using Word, what size font should you be using?
Well, the number of pages depends on what size you want for your book. If you want a typical 6 by 9 inch book, you're getting 250 to 275 words per page. If you want to have a a book that's in the 120 pages range, but you don't quite have the volume of content to get to that point, you can shorten the trim size or the size of the book from 6x9 to maybe 5.5 by 8.5, where you get fewer words per page, but then you get more pages. Or if you want to reduce the cost of printing for the book and you have a lot of content, then you can increase the size of the page, say to 7x10 or even larger. So the word count will vary depending on the size of the book that you choose that you want to have your book printed at.
Okay, and we have another one. So on average, about how long from about 150 page draft or so to publication? About what's that time frame?
Well, the time frame will depend in part on how quickly the author can review drafts. If I send them a draft from the editor and it takes them 2 or 3 weeks to get back to me, then it's going to take longer for them to get their book published. But if it's a relatively quick turnaround, say 2 or 3 days per draft, then they can have their book in somewhere in the 4 to 5 month range. So a lot quicker than a traditional publisher would provide their book.
Okay, we have another one coming in. We have someone who's writing a book of poetry, and the question is, what is the optimum number of poems to include in the book? And should they include narrative text to precede each section of poems separated by category?
That's a difficult question. I would look at different poetry books and see what makes sense to you, because there are books that are short and there are books that are longer. I don't know that there is really an ideal number of poems to include. And I would include text if you think it's going to help your reader. I personally find that text in poetry books is helpful, but it depends on who your target reader is for that. So I'm not sure that I did a great job in answering that. Poetry is not my main area of expertise. It's really more the business books. So I just recommend going online and taking a look at other poetry books and seeing what their lengths are.
Okay, great.
Okay, it's at the end of the hour. Do we have one more that I can answer?
Sure, yes. How does one determine the best writing option? Should it depend on author or topic? Can you expand on that?
Well, if you're somebody who doesn't particularly like writing, then your best options are using a ghostwriter if you can afford them, or recording or speaking your book if you don't want to invest that money in the ghostwriter. If you're somebody who is perfectly comfortable writing your book, but you don't have much time, you might want to hire the ghostwriter. If you don't have that time restraint or constraint, I should say, then work on staging your book. I think that would be a good option for you. Or just work on filling in the pieces of your outline and work and go from there, because that'll get done a little bit faster than the staging of the book. Well, thank you very, very much for attending here today. I look forward to having consultations with each of you. If there are questions that I didn't get to that you have, feel free to email me, judy@skillbites.net. And for more resources, go to my website, skillbites.net, and hopefully you'll find the information that you are looking for.